Dear colleagues, I am happy to see all of you in our symposium. My name is Alexander Sevastianov. I am a leading staff scientist at the Institute of Neuroscience and Medicine, Novosibirsk, Russia. Also, I am a full professor at Department of General Informatics at the Novosibirsk State University, also Novosibirsk, Russia. A topic of our symposium is an application of artificial intelligence in psychophysiology, neuroscience, and medicine. As well known, artificial intelligence, its approach in computer science and data science. And now it's a very quick developed area in scientific research and practical application. And today we would like to discuss different aspects of application of artificial intelligence in such empirical science and practical areas as neuroscience and medicine. Our speakers are specialists in different areas. We have mathematics, specialists in computer science, also neurobiologists and psychophysiologists and psychologists. And I hope we will have interesting symposia and discussion in such interdisciplinary areas. First of our speaker is Professor Dmitry Polchinov. He is a leading staff scientist at the Institute of Mathematics, Novosibirsk. Also, he is a head of the Department of General Informatics at the Novosibirsk State University. Dmitry, please, could you start your presentation?
Thank you. 1 minute.
Yeah, you can start.
Yes. Do you see my presentation?
Yes, we see.
Good. Well, my report is devoted to model theoretical methods of knowledge generation based on medical record analysis. Well, our research is based on ontological model of the domain, which have 4 levels. I will speak about it a bit later in details. Now, I say a few words about model theoretical approach to automated knowledge generation. Well, in fact, we can consider 2 approaches: syntactic approach, theories, which sets of sentences, formulas, and semantic models. But in both cases, we should deal with infinite many objects, infinite number of statements, or models which have infinite number of elements. So it's better to consider intermediate approach, fragments of atomic diagrams of models. What is atomic diagram? It's atomic sentences, it's predicate of constants or negation of predicate of constants. For example, love Adam if, it means Adam loves Eve, or Eve does not love Adam. Well, and we don't consider whole atomic diagram because it's infinite. We consider only its finite part, which we call fragment. For example, if we consider medical record, of course, it contains only a finite number of facts. And to provide automatic generation of fragment of atomic diagram, we use software logic text, which developed by me and Olga Bakhasueva. We start with natural language text and construct fragment of the atomic diagram of given model. But model is only imaginable, and part of diagram is what we really have. The user of this software can edit fragment, make visualization, and so on. And now we deal with text in Russian, and so screenshots will be in Russian. Features. User may create and edit its own dictionaries and vocabularies. Software can give answers of some direct questions, very simple questions. Its main window, we can consider such sentence. Well, is it good? Do you listen to me properly?
Yes,
Alexander Nikolaevich.
Yes.
Good. I just correct. That is, everything is good. Well, it's a sentence which we consider, and starting of which we make a fragment of atomic diagram, and we create generate a model. First we define signature. For example, verbs are potential predicates, nouns are potential constants. And we construct set of logical sentences, and user may visualize and edit the model. For example, we consider such set of logical sentences, atomic sentences. Well, and we can consider signature or build diagram, build graph. Well, for example, if you want to build graph, yes, we push this button and consider as diagram its predicate, predicate negations, reference indices, who, for example, missing terms, and so on. Well, we can consider signature, well, a constants, number of constants, and number of predicates. And we may consider questions. We may generate questions. Yes, first we automatically generate system automatically generate. When we consider different sources, patient records, or if we consider patient record and some extra information, which, for example, is presented in some article, we need to integrate this knowledge. Well, and first problem is that various sources may be considered in different contexts and different ontologies and may contain different presuppositions. Well, and first we should integrate explicit information, which is extracted immediately, and also we ontologies and presuppositions. Well, and we may obtain some logical contradictions. For example, when we use some mathematical logic, plus, and so on. And contradictions may be not real contradictions. It may be connected with homonymy of terms. Well, different presuppositions. Well, and our goal is development of automatical methods for formalization of knowledge about factors or depressions based on the analysis of data extracted from the patient medical records. This is this window presents some persons, yes, without names, number 4, 5, and so on, yes, and information about these patients. And now go back to our 4 levels ontological model or semantic model. Well, and it contains 4 levels. First level is domain ontology. It means, алло, что? What? Domain ontology, it means description of signature. It's set of key concepts of the domain and meaning of this domain concepts. General knowledge and domain regularities, sentences which are true for every case, domain case, the set of domain cases which we consider in given moment. It's empirical knowledge about domain. For example, it might be a set of medical patient records. Estimated and probabilistic knowledge is which is represented with the help of fuzzy models. And with the help of first 3 levels, we may generate estimated probabilistic knowledge. For example, what is probability that this patient have coronavirus infection, or what is probability if the patient really has coronavirus infections, what is probability that he will have some bad consequences of this fact. And first level is ontology. It's handbook of ontologies. Yes, represents knowledge about the concepts of object domain and relation between key concepts. We consider ontology of psychological, medical, neurophysiological, psychophysiological concepts, and so on. And ontologies are presented in some hierarchy. General knowledge describes the relations between diseases, critical states, and so on. It's extracted from the normative acts, for example, Ministry of Health and others, monographs or medical some articles, and so on. It's formally represented in the ontology or in ontological model by using universal sentences. It means sentences. The next is a set of domain cases. Domain case knowledge is extracted from medical records of real patients. It is described on the formal fragment of atomic diagrams with the help of tool of software, which is presented before. It is represented as overall diagrams. Yes, it's a screenshot of such base of domain cases. We see different patients and information about these patients. And what is problem? The next problem is that domain cases and situations are models of different signatures. Why? Because in one medical record we can see one results of one tests or one symptoms and so on. In other medical records, it is presented to other test results or other symptoms or other medicines and so on. So in fact, we should deal with model of different signatures. So we need to consider model theoretical approach to axiomatize the set of models of different signatures. To do this, we have defined notions of theory of class of models of different signatures and axiomatizable class of models of different signatures. Yes, and next step, next level is estimated knowledge. It's used for automatical insurance of medical advice. generated user algorithms implemented in functional part of system, and formally its estimated knowledge represented using fuzzy models. Yes. So we have domain ontology, general knowledge, domain cases which have information about real patients, and we generate estimated and probabilistic knowledge. Well, and to do this, we use, as I say, Boolean-valued models. Its definition, I have no time to speak in details about it. And with the help of Boolean-valued models, we obtain fuzzy models. With the help of fuzzification of fuzzy models, with the help of some homomorphism, and for each element, for each S of sigma, its statements of this signature, and for each sentence phi, for each sentence phi, we have some number between 0 and 1. It's fuzzy estimation of truth of this sentence. So, results. Model theoretical approach was used for the formalization of knowledge about factors of depressions. Depression, it was formalized knowledge about cases of subject domains. Subject domain was formally represented as class of algebraic system for analyzing the cases of this subject domain. The main problem of this research is that domain cases are described using different sets of concepts, and different signatures. Therefore, the subject domain was formalized by a class of algebraic system having different signatures. Yes, and conclusions. Logical semantic models are applied for extraction of knowledge about patients from the medical databases that allow describing and analyzing exact and detailed structure of the subject information. Logical semantic methods allow to accurately formulate hypotheses about possible reasons in neurological and psychiatric disorders. So we may generate hypotheses, and what is very important, hypotheses are automatically generated, and then real doctor, real specialist can consider this hypothesis and understand what are true, what are false, and so on. So we combine automatic approach and real doctor.
Okay, Dmitry, thank you for your presentation. Has somebody some questions?
I have a question.
Yeah, please.
Thank you for your talk. Please tell me, is it tool applicable to find the inappropriate medical helps from the doctors?
Excuse me, I don't understand the question.
Mistakes in, can it be helpful for find mistakes in treatment, in medical treatment?
Yes, of course. No, thank you for your go. We developed some medical system to solve this problem. For example, that different treatment may contradict, yes? And for example, in the case that one doctor say to patient to have one treatment, one specialist other treatment, it is possible to do it, and for this we have based knowledge base about such critical contradictions between different treatment. Yes, it's possible, and I think it's really helpful for doctors, because a lot of very huge number of information, and sometimes person cannot analyze this whole huge whole part.
Okay, thank you for your answer. Any other questions? Okay, I have a question. As we know, the most standard approach for analysis of depression artificial intelligence approach. It's application of neuronal networks. How do you think? What is the main disadvantage of such approach, and how theoretical model approach can solve these problems? Thank you. Dmitry, hello. Did you hear my question? Something happens. Dmitry disappears. Okay. I don't know what happens with Dmitry. He disappears from our symposium. Unfortunately, we have no time to wait him. Next speaker will be Boris Chernyshev from the Moscow State University of Psychology and Education. Boris, please, could you start your presentation?
Thank you for inviting me to this symposium. And I will give a psychophysiological or even neurophysiological perspective on intelligence. And this work was done in MEG Center at Moscow State University of Psychology and Education in Moscow. Learning and memory probably is a basis, is a prerequisite, at least for the natural intelligence, because biological organisms are born with almost no knowledge, only little knowledge is inborn, and biological organisms have to acquire knowledge so in order to be adaptive, in order to survive. And importantly, of course, it's really difficult to extract causality from external events in their environment. So actually, biological organisms extract just correlation in events. And that's essentially learning, like a typical, very well-known example of a dog studied by Van Pavlov. So one stimulus is food, another stimulus is bell, and they, when they are paired in time, they mean they correlate in time. That leads to association. That means acquisition of new knowledge. This is how it works in biological organisms. And importantly, whatever we want intelligence to do, it has to operate data, and this data has to be acquired through learning and memory. Importantly, higher cognitive functions of human beings that we would probably like to imitate in artificial intelligence, it's really complex in humans. And learning and memory also may be really, really complex. While most of our knowledge, most of our neurophysiological knowledge of learning and memory comes from very simple models, animal models, mollusks. This is okay. This is very important for science, but still we know very little about the level of learning at higher cognitive functions. And we chose to study semantic speech learning, which is essentially a very high level, because speech is characteristic only of human beings, not for animals. And semantics is a key characteristic of language. So it's generally accepted that language acquisition actually involves biological mechanisms of work. This is generally acknowledged, but nobody actually knows how that works at such a high cognitive level. There are many questions that have to be answered, and we will address three questions. One question concerns how quickly is the association is formed? Is consolidation needed? Because some biological models presuppose that at least several hours or half a day are needed for consolidation. You wouldn't see anything immediately after learning. Another aspect that has to be studied concerns that correlation. So in order for association to be formed, you need just correlation in time between two events. But what if they are separated? Then what if there is a temporal gap between the two events? How can the brain or any system find a correlation and thus a relation between them? So Hebbian rule presupposes that there should be overlap in time. And the final question that I will address concerns post-processing. So we can learn just from few experiences. Do we need to do something with information? Do we need some post-processing so that speed up learning and make it more precise? So the experimental model that we used involves a presentation, auditory presentation of 8 pseudo words. They look like Russian words, but they have no meaning. They are counterbalanced, and 4 of them were supposed to be associated with movements: 2 hands, 2 feet. Participants were learning through trial and error. They had to try movements, and they were rewarded for correct movement, and thus they were learning. It's really important that we had 4 pseudo words that didn't require association. This is really important, and this wasn't done in many other experiments. This is really important because when you present any stimuli to the brain still learns if nothing happens. It becomes familiarized, it habituates, whatever, but it's also learning. And we have to distinguish such a passive familiarization with a targeted learning of that brings new knowledge. In this case, it's semantic relation between sounds and movements. So far, our experiment had 4 blocks. We started and finished the experiment with passive blocks. It's just passive presentations, no movements, even no attention, because attention was distracted to a silent movie. So that was the most strict condition to find any changes in brain processing not related to any voluntary actions, because attention was distracted and there was no movement. Also, we had 2 stages, 2 blocks of active learning early when they were just trying to guess and find relation, at advanced stage when they were mostly correct. So active block involved again presentation of pseudo words, then participants made a behavioral response, and they received a feedback telling them whether it was a correct movement or not. So first I will address passive blocks. The purpose of this part of the study was to address the role of consolidation. Is it indeed possible to find rapid cortical plasticity immediately after learning without a prolonged consolidation? Because there was a huge controversy in literature, and a general idea was that it is not possible. But indeed we found just within one experiment, within half an hour, immediately after learning, we found effects. They were mostly located in the left hemisphere, and they were mostly located in areas related to auditory processing and especially to speech processing. So it didn't look like an artifact. It looked like indeed the effect of learning that involved auditory speech processing. Okay, then we could move forward. Since we had an effect, we could move forward, and we could address the second question. whether overlap between the two stimuli can be achieved within the brain. So we addressed active stages here, active learning. So at the first stage, it was just trial and error attempts to acquire this knowledge. And the second block is when participants were more or less correctly performing the task. And what we found interesting effects in two areas. One corresponds to temporal areas, mostly probably speech areas, and another one corresponds to medial frontal motor areas related to movement initiation, to initial program of movement to be executed. And what we found, this is stimulus-locked activity, RMS signal across channels shown here. So blue means before. At early stage of learning, this is a component which probably is N400. A representation, the semantic representation, so it subsides very quickly at the early stage of learning, but at the late stage of learning, it becomes much, much longer. And it is both in auditory areas and in motor areas. What is most important, when we look at response-locked data, we see a very, very drastic difference. So at very early stage of learning, which is shown in blue, 0 is the moment of movement. So the brain response to the sensory event just subsides, almost disappears before the movement. But at the advanced stage of learning, it becomes very, very pronounced, very strong, both in sensory areas and in areas related to motor initiation. Thus, the brain provides conditions for this temporal overlap. So representation is not only prolonged, representation is renewed at the time when motor program evolved. And this probably creates condition for association to be fortified and stored in the brain for future use. And this is the same data at the level of brain sources. So again, it's mostly temporal areas, mostly speech areas in the left, temporal cortex, and some medial areas related to motor initiation and motor assessment. So the third question that we addressed, so is there any specific post-processing so that we can learn within just few trials? So what can we do? Probably we replay the association that has been just implemented so that we need less trials to learn. Again, we addressed active blocks when participants were learning. Again, we compare an early stage when participants are just trying and making errors, and advanced stage when they already make targeted movements. And also we compared that to self-paced movements. So for self-paced movements, we have a very traditional picture. Okay, we analyzed beta oscillations just because beta oscillations are related to motor processes like motor programming and assessing of the results of motor act. And also beta oscillations are really important in such functions as maintenance of cognitive set. So for self-paced movements, we see beta suppression during movement, 0 is movement, and we see beta rebound, which starts rather late after the movement stops, and it's located in motor areas, somatotopic motor areas. This is just normal situation. This is not cognitive. This is just motor. But what if we look at learning? So at early stages of learning, there is almost no beta increase after the movement. Nothing to rehearse just because it's mostly errors. As soon as movements become targeted, so the memory is actively forming, you see that there's a very strong beta increase that starts very early, that starts approximately at the moment of movement. Not after the moment, as in the case of motor events, of motor beta rebound, but immediately after movement initiation. It had a wide brain distribution over brain areas. So this is for suppression, and this is location for this increase in beta, which starts very early. Actually, in some areas, it started even before movement itself, even before zero, even before buttons were pressed. And that's indeed looks like as soon as the motor program is initiated, it goes on, and at the same time, the brain rehearses this event, thus probably make it stronger in memory and cleaning it from any interferences from other programs. As you remember, in our experiment, participants were learning 4 different movements at the same time. So to conclude, 3 points that I was trying to show now, that indeed using imagery, unlike other methods, unlike EEG and unlike fMRI, we could demonstrate very early effects of learning in the cortex, and this is learning at very high cognitive level related to speech semantics. Next, during such learning, we found that the brain does a nice trick to implement the Hebbian type coincidence. It reactivates the sensory trace so that now it meets in time with the motor program, so that traditional mechanisms of associative learning can be implemented, even though in reality the events are separated in time. And finally, we found those events in beta band that evidence that there is post-processing replaying of the successfully implemented association that probably strengthens the memory and allows for remembering the task in fewer trials than it would be otherwise possible. And I believe that these hints may be useful for the development of artificial intelligence if you want to make it really intelligent. Like human beings try to think about themselves as being intelligent. Okay, that's it. Thank you. And this is our site, the Moscow Mac Center. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Boris, for your presentation. Has somebody some questions? I have just one question. Could you explain in more details about possible relations of your study with artificial intelligence? You just mentioned about this in a few words, but could you tell about this something more? Thank you.
I believe that development of artificial intelligence actually, as far as I know, it goes its own way, which is good. Okay, a lot of success has been achieved in this area. Now we have very intelligent systems that can do actually much more than humans can do, like face recognition, many other tasks. Okay, so the development of artificial intelligence is really successful. but I would say it is initially limited to certain tasks, like you do it for face recognition, and then this artificial intelligence does face recognition. But I suggest that we can address to natural intelligence, which is not limited to one single task, because biological organisms have to survive, and they do not know what is really important. So they have to learn just everything, and they have to use it for survival. So I believe if we want in some future, if we want in some future to develop artificial intelligence that is really intelligent in the sense of human intelligence, you have to address the mechanisms of intelligence as they work in the human brain.
Okay, thank you. As I understand, the topic of our symposium is application of artificial intelligence for study in psychophysiology and neuroscience. But your talk, it's opposite topic. Yeah, it's application of results of psychophysiological studies for elaboration of artificial intelligence. Is it so?
Yes.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thank you. Thank you, Boris, for your talk. And our next speaker will be Roman Ivanov. Roman, are you ready?
Yes, give me a second to set things up.
Yes, please start.
Okay.
Yes, sure, please start.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Today, I would like to present you the results of our work on creating the database to search for association between genetic factors and electroencephalographic markers of depressive disorders, IC-BrainDB. The study of biological basis of individual differences in human behavior is one of the main interests of modern psychology. Medical relevance of this topic is due to the fact that development of a number of neurological and psychiatric diseases depends on the characteristics of individuals. Therefore, the search for biological factors associated with human behavior is very important for the development of personalized therapy methods. In our study, we were interested in collecting and systemizing diverse information related to depressive and anxiety disorders. The ultimate goal of this project was to search for association between molecular genetic, electrophysiological, behavioral, and psychological characteristics of people. It is with this in mind that we have developed an internet resource, including the database and tools for primary presentation of the collected data of genetic factors, results of EEG tests, and psychological questionnaires. Our database was populated with data that we received together with our colleagues from the Institute of Psychology and Basic Medicine. The sample of our study was 1,010 people from different regions of Russia. The sample is represented by people of different ethnicities, age groups, and with a sex ratio of 1:1. We should also mention the group of clinically depressed people who participated in the study. Subjects underwent a series of EEG tests under different conditions, under stop signal paradigm condition, while going through game models of social interaction, and conditions of emotional sentence recognition. The tests were specifically selected to look for neurophysiological features under condition of emotional recognition and social interactions. At the moment, our database contains about 40,000 files with the test results weighing a total of 2.5 terabytes. After the EEG was recorded, subjects underwent a set of psychological questionnaires for estimation of their personality traits, states under EEG recording, or inclination to depressive disorders. Some of these tests are shown on slide. The list of tests was expertly selected by our colleagues. The result of the tests were processed and together with the questions themselves were put in the database. Then we selected 133 genes associated with depressive and anxiety disorders by using the reconstruction and gene networks analysis of neurotransmitter systems and by analyzing the literature data and specialized databases, some of which presented on slide. Based on the selected genes, we prepare libraries for target sequencing. Then samples of biological materials were taken from the subjects, namely buccal epithelium or blood. We performed target sequencing on the isolated DNA from biological material. The sequenced data from 1,010 subjects were processed to search for allelic variants in the selected genes. The resulting allelic variants for each subject, totaling more than 6,300 mutations, were put in the database. The slide shows the example of individual allelic variant card that contains in our database. Based on the above information, we created the ICBrainDB database. The database has relational structure and is implemented with PostgreSQL. It consists of 9 tables describing the main elements of the structure shown on slide. Main nodes are human, that contains the key parameter of subjects such as sex, age, nationality, etc. Mutation, which contains the data on mutation in a particular subject. Test is a list of questionnaires. And EEG files is a table that lists path to EEG data files for specific examining. Because of the fact that above mentioned data are placed in one place, we can make complex queries to the database and make reports on this data. Access to data is implemented through REST IP using programming languages and various software like MATLAB or Octave. You can download any data about the test subject. The result of API request is a JSON table, which can be parsed using standard tools. This way, you can customize your own script to analyze the data and generate summary images like the one presented on slide. In conclusion, ICBrainDB is a growing database of physiological, psychological, and genetic data associated with emotional perception, depression, and anxiety. The integrated database will enable users to easily access, download, and further process information about individual behavioral characteristics and psychophysiological responses, along with inherited trait data. We believe that the existence of such a resource will play an important role in the further search for association between genetic factors and EEG markers on depression. Furthermore, we plan to maintain the ICBrainDB by adding both new subjects and raw EEG data processing results to provide users with as much research information as possible. This is it for my topic. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for your presentation. Any question to Roman? Has somebody some questions on it? Okay, no questions. Roman, thank you for your presentation. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Next speaker is Andrei Bocharov. He is a senior staff scientist at the Institute of Neuroscience and Medicine, Novosibirsk, Russia. Andrei, are you ready? Andrei? Okay, start. Andrei, we don't hear you.
Dear colleagues, let me introduce my talk. neurocomputational method for estimation of balance of resting state oscillatory networks associated with personal style of emotional regulation. Different theoretical models divide the styles of emotional regulation into adaptive and maladaptive. Cognitive reappraisal of emotions is considered as an adaptive strategy and is aimed at creating an interpretation of stressful situation that reduces the meaning of emotional impact. Studies have shown that the use of cognitive reappraisal strategy reduced the intensity of the experience of negative emotions and decreased the activation of sympathetic nervous system. In contrast, expressive suppression is considered as inadequate reaction to various stressors and could be the risk factor for distress and maladaptive behavior. This maladaptive strategy is aimed to reduce the behavioral manifestation of an already recent emotional reaction. Some people may have a tendency to constantly experience negative thoughts. Rumination means the repetitive focusing on the symptoms of one distress and refers to maladaptive styles of emotional regulation. It was shown that the tendency to suppress undesirable thoughts paradoxically led to the high frequency of undesirable thoughts. Wegener and Znakos developed the white bear suppression inventory, which was originally intended to measure people's tendency to suppress very undesirable thoughts. But according to Racine, the white bear suppression inventory does not measure the ability to suppress undesirable thoughts, but rather the lack of successful suppression of thoughts and could be considered as a maladaptive regulatory strategy. Resting state networks have been intensively studied over the past 2 decades. The most studied network is default mode network, which exhibited the activity increase during self-referential processing. The amount shows the decrease of activity during intentional tests and was respectively termed as test negative network. Some other resting state network exhibit the activity increase during attentional tests and were termed as a task positive network, which typically shows the increase in activation during stimulus-driven cognitive and effective informational processing. The aim of research was to study the association of balance of connectivity of the default mode network and task positive networks with a personal style of emotional regulation. We put forward 2 hypotheses. At first, we suggested that in people who prefer maladaptive styles of regulation, with such people had high scores on rumination or expressive suppression or suppression of thought skills, and DMN would dominate as a TPM. Whereas TPM, which play an important role in emotional regulation, would dominate as a DMN in individuals who prefer an adaptive strategy of cognitive reappraisal. The sample included 50 subjects. EEGs were recorded with using a cap with 127 electrodes referred to CZ. After registration, participants completed a set of questionnaires for assessment of personal preferences in emotional regulation. The emotion regulation questionnaire was used to assess the individual characteristic of emotion regulation strategies by using cognitive reappraisal and expressive suppression scales. Rumination was measured by ruminative responses scale, and suppression was measured by the wide suppression inventory. The connectivity measures of resting state network were calculated in EEG data at resting state with open eyes condition. Cortical sources of electrical activity were localized by the using beamforming method. Each network was built from connectivity maps of four most representative seeds, whose coordinates were borrowed from studies. Where were 8 seeds location, 4 for demand and 4 for TPM. Demand seeds were placed in medial prefrontal cortex, posterior cingulate cortex, and the left and right inferior parietal lobule. TPM seeds were left and right dorsolateral prefrontal cortices and the left and right insular cortices. Slide show pipeline of EEG data analysis. After filtering the data into frequency of interest, beamformer special filtering was applied to project the data into source space. The orthogonalization method was applied for the correctional signal leakage arising from the poor spatial resolution of the source localization. After leakage correction, Hilbert transform was applied for calculation the amplitude of the signal envelope after reducing the sampling rate to 1 second. The seed-based correlational analysis was applied to obtain the connectivity maps which were subsequently used for statistical tests. To reveal the effects of different styles of emotional regulation on the balance of connectivity between demand and TPM, the regression was performed on the T contrast demand greater than TPM or demand less than TPM in the second level SPM analysis. False positive control was implemented through a combination of voxel level threshold and cluster level extent threshold at p values of 0.001. Cognitive reappraisal scale positively correlated with the self-measured level of positive emotions. Also, cognitive reappraisal negatively correlated with the self-measured level of arousal. Thought suppression scale correlated with the rumination scale. Regression of cognitive reappraisal scores on the contrast demand less than TPM were revealed significant cluster in the left dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. Testing the effects of rumination and suppression on the demand greater than TPM contrast yielded significant results in the right temporal cortex. such result were significant for rumination and suppression, but regression of expressive suppression scores on the demand greater than TPM contrast did not reveal significant effects. We can conclude that the adaptive strategy cognitive reappraisal of emotions correlated with the dominance of attention networks in the left dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. Such result may be associated with more effective control of negative thoughts and higher level of positive emotions. Correlation of suppression and rumination scores with the dominance of default mode network in the right temporal cortex could be associated with the processes of emotional introspection. Thank you for your attention.
Andrei, thank you for your presentation. Has somebody some questions? Dr. Bacharov. Okay, my classical question, how it is related to this artificial intelligence?
It's not have a right connection with artificial intellect, but in the neuroscience methods, such information will be useful for designing maybe next studies.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Andrei. Thank you for your presentation. Our last speaker is Pavel Rudic from the Novosibirsk State University. Pavel, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, please. Could you present your talk?
Okay. Dear colleagues, it was nice to meet you here, and I would like to discuss with you the possibility of using the interpretability of neural networks for applications for data correlation analysis. My name is Pavel Rudic, and I'm from Novosibirsk. The background.
Excuse me, we don't see your presentation.
Yes, Pavel, we don't see your presentation.
Okay. Have you seen it?
Yes,
now?
sure. Now we can see.
Okay, okay. So I would like to describe if the tools for interpretable machine learning fit our goals to estimate the data correlations with really low correlations, and usually psychophysiological research involves the study of human physiology through physiology signals. There is no direct huge correlation usually between psychology and physiology signals. There is no huge correlations between experimental variables which we measure in experiments, the physiological phenomena which we study, and psychological processes, what's happened in human mind. And most of relations, they are quite low at and it's quite complicated to determine them from experimental results and determine the shape of behavior between psychological phenomena, physiological processes. Results are highly affected by interpersonal variability, intrapersonal variability, situation variability. Every person who comes to us to every particular experiment have his own situation, his own ideas in mind, and thinking on some other processes. He might sleep well or have damaged arm, or all these situations, they are highly affect the results which we obtain in experiment. And this dependency we have to take into account, and we have to pass the thousands of people to decrease this interpersonal situational variabilities, and try to use some models how to include this variability in results calculations. One of the most well-studied variabilities, variability of alpha frequency. People with a low alpha frequency, they are different from people with high alpha frequency, and so on. Which kind of ways now we can use to decrease this variability? We can just neglect and use symptom factor analysis. We can use a kind of linear regression inside ANOVA-MANOVA analysis, in which we also have kind of linear regression of factors. We can split the whole data set into sub-data sets and analyze the small data sets separately, and construct these small data sets according the meta factors on which we split it, and construct the results in the whole data set and get the shape of these vectors. Or we can use kind of multi-level mutation analysis and such kind of analysis. And all these ideas, they are based on linear assumption of these factors, and this linear assumption have its own limitation. First of all, there is no shape dependency of these factors, and these assumptions, they are unstable to anomalies, and just small anomalies far away, they highly change the linear assumption. And finally, zero correlations which we can get in these assumptions. It doesn't mean that there is no dependency in between our results and these factors. And that's why we need to search for some additional methods for analysis. And one of these possible methods which I propose to discuss is the method of usage, the interpretability of convolutional neural networks. And I will discuss this method. The main idea is that for all these factors, we can extract some features which we are interested in. Need extract some meta factors, metadata, and then accomplish this data into table, and then teach the convolution network on this data. We can use all this column as input factors and the required result as the output, and for each person we can construct a single or some lines and fit the network to fit this data set in the best way to produce from input columns the output columns of results. And finally, when we got this data set teached, when our network, convolutional network study our data set, we can analyze which kind of dependency is hidden inside the network architecture. For this analyzation, there are toolboxes constructed and published, and I prefer shapely values which were published in GitHub on 2017 and published in papers Landbergs and all. And the main idea of such a kind of toolbox, shapely values, lime, grad, etc., that we can estimate the main base value which predicted by network, and for each separate data come for input, the predicted output will be somehow shifted to increasing or decreasing direction. And this change is highly connected with difference of input. And when we study each network, we can manually fix all the inputs except one, and start to move each input from 0 to plus infinitum, minus infinitum, and see how the output is connected to the input. And based on this idea, we can check the influence of each input exactly in this situation of the person who provide us this vector of inputs. And for every person, different input have his own influence, and this influence, they are not linear and can be modeled by this convolution network. We can use different networks. We can take some tabnet or a random forest or cat boost, and there is no free lunch, there is no well defined best network for every psychological, physiological experiment we run. For some results, cat boost provide better results. For some data, random forest provide better results. And on this slide, I provided some generated example and on which I compared a random forest and cat boost. I generated 1,000 lines, and each line consists of 4 columns which were generated randomly, and fifth column was constructed by summarizing of one of the column or cosinus of the first column, or just linear summarization of second, third column. And I used classical importance calculation to see how the fitted neural network thing for linear, we get just expected importance, and how it fitted for multiplying, multi-summary, and we see that for linear summary we got nice fitting, and for cosinus, despite of there is no linear dependency, there is some importance and really comparable to linear importance. Next study which I provide to do how the noise decrease such a kind of shape. I added the noise not just to results but to columns, which we also measure with some procedure, and also measure with really high random noise. And here we see that, first of all, when we add the additional impact of noise for single input, we don't affect the independent inputs, and when we add the input with a really high noise, we just decrease the influence of this input to the final result. And also what we see that here is an inverse situation, that the random forest provided us the better results than cut boost, and provide us low noise comparing the cut boost. What is another topics from real physiological experiments I provide to discuss, that situational interpersonal variability, they can provide really huge fluctuations for us. Here I modeled the study of N4000 EEG result on stimulus presentation, and for stimulus I used the presentation of adjective, emotional, positive, negative, and study how N4000 reacted on this adjective presentation. And here we can see then for some persons the results are really distinguished. Some of them are positive, some of them are negative, and they are really high distinguished. For another persons, there is a really low distinguishing of reaction of different kind of adjectives. Another property of adjective is the property how frequently the adjective used by person. Is it in his vocabulary, or he used just really low, just time to time? And here we see that the low using vocabulary words, they really impress person, and the N40 increase with low using vocabulary words, but like shape is really different from linear. Another example I want to present is the applications of single mutations of GNMXR8 comparing the depression. We see that not all the mutations affect and play a role in depression. Some of them play some role, some of them play absolutely no role for depression. And finally, which kind of conclusion I propose to do? First of all, in test, we see that the shape dependency, they might be constructed in data despite of there is no linear dependency. But if we speak about the comparison between different variables, neural networks doesn't provide just precise estimation of this influence, but provide kind of average estimation, but doesn't provide the precise level. And comparing to real experiments, I propose to test different kind of networks, and there is no free lunch. There is no just one network really good fitted any data set, and we can test this data set, test the neural networks, and choose the best one. But in general, I think that these methods of interpretability, they provide us really nice estimation of factors behavior, and we can use these neural networks to regress the results on factors which play some kind of noise for us. Thank you for your attention, and I will ask you to say your questions. I will be glad to answer them. Thank you.
Okay, Pavel, thank you for your talk. Has somebody some questions to Pavel? Alex.
Hello, do you listen to me?
Yeah, sure.
Well, I have a question. Perhaps it's some.
We don't hear you, Dmitry. We don't
the
hear
sound
you.
is really bad.
Specification of classical speech. You said you.
Please
Sorry?
repeat your question. We don't hear it. You repeat your question, please, Dmitry.
Well.
No, it's impossible to
Beginning
understand.
of your speech, interpretable or explainable artificial intelligence. Sorry?
Again, we hear just half of your question. First half of your question was non-recognizable. Please repeat your question or ask question in chat.
Okay.
Hello, do you listen to me? Or perhaps it's problem with connection.
Yes. Now, yes.
So.
Again, no. Ask your question in chat. Yes,
so perhaps, Alexander Nikolaevich, I ask question a bit later.
Okay.
Okay, unfortunately, some problems with sound. Dmitry, maybe you can ask us in chat.
Hello?
Yeah.
Perhaps now you can listen me.
Yes, sure.
Hello?
Yes, we are listening.
No, it's good. Well, my question perhaps is specification of classical question of Alexander Nikolaevich. In the beginning of your report, you said few words about interpretable artificial intelligence or explainable artificial intelligence. Could you say do your results can help to solve this problem, the problem of explainable artificial intelligence?
Oh, okay. Now it's beautiful.
Yeah. Why I think this work is really important for the topic is that using these methods, we can get better connections between what's in human mind, what's in physiological results we obtain in experiment, and what's we got in experimental data and meta factors, because there are a lot of really factors which affect all this separated data, and using these machine learning methods, we can determine the connections which can be neglected in classical data analysis.
Pavel, thank you for your response, for your answer. Unfortunately, we have no time for prolongation of our symposium. We should finish our discussion today. Thank you for all participants for your presentations, for your questions and answers. Thanks a lot for your participation.
Thank you, Alexander Nikolaevich, for good organization.
Well, okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.